Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. I'm Craig Hoffman. That is Logan Paulson. You can catch me weekday afternoons on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Catch Logan on Command Center on the Commanders YouTube page, and you can catch both of us I guess not Sunday at 10 a.m. For Countdown to Kickoff, before kickoff on Countdown to Kickoff, because we are going to be, I believe, 6 o'clock to 8:20 on Sunday, because that's Sunday Night Football coming up. By the way, we actually haven't talked about that, so let's try to squeeze two things in here real quick in the next 10 minutes before this podcast is over. One, how big of a deal is it that this is Sunday Night Football, then going into Saturday football across the country, San Francisco? Like, some people have made a pretty big deal out of it, including, by the way, Ron Rivera's pretty ticked off about it. Yeah. How big of a deal is that as a player to try to, first of all, just the difference between a Sunday 1 o'clock and a Sunday night? I know how different it was as a reporter, and I didn't recover well, and I didn't have to play a snap. And then the West Coast trip, day early, the whole thing.
So just to give you logistically, right? So obviously you're not going to finish the game until 11 o'clock, right? And you want to start your prep, I don't want to say immediately, but pretty close after the game, not for, not even to review the film, but kind of want to get started on San Francisco. That film won't be up till probably 1:30, 2 a.m., right? So you kind of lose that post-game prep time, which is, a couple hours, but it's significant, right? Because you got to get your install ready for Tuesday, right? And on a short week, that might even be Monday. So in terms of work week schedule with the trip, it is a big deal. It's going to be tough to get those guys back to 100%. They're probably just going to go, they're probably in a straight walkthrough mode already. I think it helps coming off the bye. And if you're smart, if you're Ron, you kind of say, let's start prepping some San Francisco stuff this week because we just saw the Giants. So if we can get kind of that foundation laid so we don't have to kind of be scrambling to prep post
So
Giants
you're talking
game.
about as a coaching staff or with the players?
The coaching staff. I'm saying the coaching staff, they need to prep that. That needs to be prepped so that they can just kind of come in on Monday and be like, hey, this is the cover 3 package for San Francisco. Obviously, we're still finalizing.
Would you have just basically taken the bye week and be like, guys, we don't have a bye week. We have San Francisco prep week, and then we're going to go back into Giants mode and then go back into San Francisco mode? Because in that way, it kind of would, I guess, work out. Thank God for the bye.
Yeah, so that's kind of how maybe not that the structure is irrelevant. It just is we're going to prep for the Giants, and then we're going to prep for the Giants for 5 hours a day. And then for the last 3 hours, let's make sure we're starting to lay the foundation for San Francisco from a coaching standpoint. And so you just have all the cut-ups ready. You have all that stuff ready so you can kind of accelerate that process. So in a way, it is good for the bye, but it does make the bye less enjoyable for the coaching staff, I think, which is probably one of Ron's frustrations. And also the recovery. That trip to San Francisco is a nightmare. I never went to San Francisco when I played here, but I did go to Seattle. It's a beast of a trip, right? Because it's a long flight. There's a big time change. You're playing really early in the day, kind of for your body clock, and then the trip back is tough, right? Because you don't get back until way later in the evening. So it's a tough trip, and it's against a good opponent. I think one of the reasons Ron's probably frustrated, or I'm assuming he's frustrated, is because San Francisco is the better team, right? So you want as much time to get ready for them as possible. So I think it is a big deal. But ultimately, no one cares, right? No one cares because you got to do it.
The win-loss record doesn't care. It's going to be a win or a loss, and it will go, or a tie, as we found out, and it's going to go in that column. I think the other thing, just from a physical standpoint, you talk about the recovery. Sleep is the most important recovery tool you have, and when you are juiced up after a Sunday night game, win or loss or tie, it's going to be hard to go to bed, and that's your first night of recovery. So instead of finishing a game at 4 o'clock, getting home by 6:30, having a good dinner, getting nutrition in, and then getting a good night's sleep, you are trying to get home as fast as possible after finishing a game at 11. Anyone that's gone, remember, players all live in Ashburn, Northern Virginia area. You're going from Landover. You're not going to be eating a full meal at 11 o'clock at night.
And like you said, you're up. And it's really hard to come down from a game. So I remember doing these primetime games, so Monday night, Thursday Sunday night, and not really being able to go to sleep until 3 a.m. because you're just up. And I talked to Chad about this, actually, kind of to your point, from a recovery side, and he was like, it's a nightmare, man, because no one went to sleep. No one ate food, so thank God coach has done a good job this year of pushing back start times on Monday. But it's like we
Hmm.
can't do anything physical. It's like pretty much like warm up, stretch, roll out, recovery in the building, and then to the next thing.
Like walk
So
through maybe.
yeah,
But even
right,
then,
and
you're not mentally as sharp.
right.
Like it's Monday becomes a wasted day. And it's one thing to have Monday on a wasted day. It's worth it. It's Sunday night football, whatever, when you've got a full week. But to have it
Right.
on to go to Saturday, that's a rough gig. All right.
It's a
We got
tough deal.
we got five minutes or so left in the podcast. And this is a question we could do an entire podcast on. But let's just kind of try to scratch the surface of it real quick. And this one's from Morgan. Sent it to you on Instagram. Should we consider going all in on Kyler Murray next year? Something a bit smaller than what the Broncos paid for Russ. He continued and says, there's always a team like the Rams 2 years ago that is seemingly a quarterback away from seriously contending, and it's damn near negligent for a said team to keep rolling out mediocre to bad quarterbacks. Kyler is really the only good young quarterback that might be available, and he's on a manageable contract for the next few years. Why not go all in on a guy like that? Okay, I'm going to editorialize a little bit. One, we do not know that Kyler Murray is going to be available.
Yeah.
He just this past offseason signed an extension. And when he says it's a manageable contract, I guess, but it's also the non-Deshaun Watson absolute everyone hates the Browns for signing that contract, even if it wasn't given to the worst person in the NFL.
Right.
That's still a monster contract. But I mean, then again, that's what quarterbacks cost. So that is what it is. But and then the last part I would say too is setting. I'm now leading you a little bit in the answer, but I guess I get to answer too.
Lead
It's
away. You're
the
hosting too, or you're hosting and analyst. It's a tough gig, Craig.
the Rams made the Super Bowl with Jared Goff.
Yeah.
So the Commanders, while they didn't win it till they got Matt Stafford, they did make the Super Bowl with Jared Goff. So let's see what the Commanders do with Taylor Heineke this year, certainly. And Goff is better than Heineke. But it's not like you're 100% at that level. That said, I think the premise of the question is super interesting because they do have a fantastic defense. They do have really good skill position players. There's some other holes in the team, but I guess the crux of the question really is, Logan, how aggressive should Washington be at this point going after any veteran quarterback that might be available in a trade? Or even, I will add to the question and say, giving up resources to move up in the draft and take someone they like in the top 10, let's say.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I mean, that is the question when you're building a team, right? Is like, how do you get your quarterback? And that's been Ron's question. That's everybody's asking that all the time. And in response to the question, I would say it really depends on how close you think this roster actually is. And then when you are giving up financial resources and when you're giving up draft capital, you're basically saying like, we're ready right now. And I would say that this team is not ready right now for a couple of reasons. So let's just talk about one of the most significant issues, I think, which is the offensive line. When you are bringing in a good quarterback, you need good offensive line play. And if you look at Kansas City, you look at the Bills, you look at Philly, right? I mean, those are probably three of the best offensive lines in the NFL, like pass protection and run blocking. They just get dogs. And, it's not all the top end talent, like Buffalo, their right tackle was like a 5th round pick who's grown up, right? Kansas City, Trey Smith was a 5th round pick, obviously for medical reasons, all that kind of stuff. But they've cultivated a roster that can support the quarterback position and support this tiered offense in terms of attacking down the field. So I would say they don't need to go out and spend a ton of money, but they definitely need to find a way to invest resources there. If you're paying the quarterback, free agency is essentially off the table, in my opinion, right? You can't go out and say, oh, let's go sign the best or even like a top 10 free agent right tackle or right guard or whatever the position is, right? So that's a factor. And I think and I would like them, again, you can do that in the draft. Last year would have been a good year because it was super tackle heavy, dense. And I'm sure you can find guys in this year's draft, but again, that's tough. You got to really comb through and make that happen.
And then they're rookies. I mean, that's even if you find someone who you really like and is going to be an all-pro player, unless they come in and they're awesome from day one, you're still dealing with a rookie if you're talking about winning right now.
And if you're trading draft capital, either to move up or as a package for this player that you want to trade for, Kyler Murray in this example, Lamar Jackson maybe, you are losing the opportunity to kind of get that blue chip player at the top of the draft. So I think I would say from that standpoint, the roster doesn't feel ready to me. It doesn't feel ready to make that type of move. And then you got to look at defensively. And, Daron Payne is having one of the most outstanding years for a defensive tackle ever. He is going to be very hard to re-sign if you pay a lot of money to a quarterback. So how does that degrade your defense immediately? It impacts your ability to re-sign Montez Sweat. All of those things become impacted, right? When Jamin comes up, how can you re-sign him? And the defense right now is carrying the team. And it seems weird to kind of parcel that out. You're probably trading a defensive player to get Kyler Murray here. So,
like you're saying goodbye to like Montez Sweat.
Probably. Yeah, probably. And again, so without those pieces, does Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson or insert whoever you want here, do they bring enough value add to this roster as it is right now? And I think looking at LA, for example, just because that was the example given, like they will be suffering the consequences of trading for Matt Stafford for a couple of years. They just don't have any depth on the roster, right? They have a couple of very, very good football players, Bobby Wagner, Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald, and then nobody else. And I think when you look at their offensive line as a good kind of juxtaposition with the Commanders, they have the worst rated offensive line in the NFL. Their offense is non-tenable. They have skill position players who are pretty solid, right? Obviously, Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, some kind of Van Jefferson, some pieces like that. But they can't get the football to them because the quarterback's always on his back. So, again, I don't think that this roster in the current iteration for the Commanders is ready for a fire sale to get a quarterback. I think if they could get a young quarterback, that would be ideal. But again, that's super, super challenging. There are a couple this year that I think you feel pretty good about. But the fire sale thing, I think, like look at the Broncos, for example. Last year everyone was saying, you need to get in on the Russell Wilson sweepstakes. The Commanders trying to get in. I was very anti that because I didn't think Russell was playing that well. And obviously, I feel very validated because he hasn't played that well.
Yeah.
But that franchise they have an albatross around their neck for the next
4 years.
4 years. They can't get out of that contract. They can't bring new talent in. What's that roster going to look like when you can't re-sign those defensive pass rushers? When Patrick
they already traded Bradley Chubb.
Yeah, when Patrick Surtain comes up on contract, can you re-sign him? Probably not. And so I think those are the types of issues you got to look at and say, do we trust that Kyler Murray, which again has been very up and down in his play, he's obviously very, very talented, and it would be awesome from a market standpoint, from a conversation standpoint, to get him here. But can he elevate this roster? And my answer is probably not. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, he could elevate it to a point. He's not going to elevate it to the point of $46 million a year or whatever he's making. That's what you're ultimately asking. This was my thing with Carson Wentz. Would you rather pay Marcus Mariota 12 and get $12 million of quarterback play, or pay Carson Wentz 28 and maybe get 16?
Yeah.
It's a lot of, it's market inefficiency. And Kyler Murray could help elevate a bad offensive line because he runs around like Sonic the Hedgehog. But he also is not so consistently good that it's actually going to be worth it. And so it's elevate it to what? And I don't think that the rest of the roster, to your point, would be able to hold up with the holes it would have because you are using that money to pay Kyler Murray. To that end, if I'm going to give up something for something, I'm willing to give up some capital to go and take a guy I love in the draft. If I'm convinced he's great, then at least you get him for 5 years on pretty good money. You give up some draft capital in order for the right to do that, and you do not know what he is going to be because that's the nature of quarterback prospects. But if you're going to do it, that's the way I would do it. I think the best way is to honestly just understand it's a bit of a crapshoot and commit to a guy who's pretty talented in the draft, but falls to you, and take that guy. Don't give up anything. And there's always a chance. Look, Mahomes was the 10th pick. It wasn't like he was 1 overall. Lamar's 25.
Deshaun Watson.
Watson was a later pick. You have a lot of these guys that kind of get to the middle of the first round.
And
if
they're
you
on
can,
better teams. They're on better
yeah,
rosters, and so they play better. I mean, like going back even farther, like Joe Flacco, Big Ben, they went to good teams. They were later in the draft, right?
right,
So I do think that there is value there. And then kind of look at what Scott's done this year in terms of insulating Taylor, right? Like
right,
you can insulate a young quarterback with a good defense. Like this is what Seattle did with Russell Wilson. They took a guy in the third round. He punched up for a couple of years, but the defense and the run game with Marshawn Lynch allowed him to grow. And then when it was time for him to kind of step into his own and own that team, he was able to, And I think there is a world where that is a viable thing. You just got to really trust your second tier quarterback evaluation because the top guys, I think, are pretty top because they're really good football players, right?
right.
But when you're going to be picking, which is probably about where they picked last year, maybe a little bit later, so like 16, 17 in the draft, whatever it is.
Yeah,
Then
they
your
might
second
wind up at
round,
like 20. Yeah,
yeah, then your second round pick, it's like, shoot, who's going to be there? You can move up and down a little bit, but I do think that I have always preferred that methodology because it gives you more flexibility. You're not kind of selling the farm for one player. Obviously, that works with Peyton Manning. Obviously, that works Matthew Stafford going to LA. And I think a lot of people say, oh, well, what if Matthew Stafford came here? It's not the same result. It's
right,
Matthew Stafford in Detroit again happening here, right? And so I think when I look at the situation, when I look at the roster, there's still a lot of holes. There's still a lot of. We just mentioned cornerback. Like you need
yeah,
some depth there, right? Do you draft a guy? What do you do there? So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed here, and selling the farm doesn't allow you to do that.
right. We will do probably entire podcasts on that in the offseason. Hopefully we
Yeah,
can
this
get like some
offseason, yeah.
GMs and a personnel guy or someone to come on and talk about it as well as our own thoughts on it. But wanted to answer that question because it came in and it was a good and interesting one to throw a specific name at the problem in terms of Kyler Murray as well. All right, Wednesday we will get into the Philly-New York game a little bit deeper. What can Washington take from what Philadelphia did and their beat down of the Giants? As Giants-Commanders round 2 is coming up on Sunday, and we'll answer some more questions as well. And then Thursday, we'll kind of mix it up this week because we'll do more of our preview on Wednesday.
Okay.
And then Thursday night, 7 o'clock, our plan is to do the live podcast. So we are still planning on doing that. We will tweet out / Instagram out the details once we have them. But our plan as of right now is Thursday night to go live, tape the podcast, and then we'll put it out Friday morning for those of you that can't join us Thursday evening. So make sure that you're subscribed on Odyssey Sports YouTube page if you want to take that in live. And other than that, subscribe, like wherever you're listening or watching right now, and we'll see you Wednesday for Take Command. Thanks for checking out this clip of Take Command. Or maybe it wasn't a clip. Maybe it was the whole thing. You can always get the whole thing. Let's change the graphic. Ready? Boom. Producing on the fly. Bang. Wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, right here on YouTube. You can also check us out not only at youtube.com / Craig Hoffman, but Logan, the Odyssey Sports page is live soon. That's very exciting.
That'll be fun. I don't care where you subscribe as long as you do subscribe to one of these platforms. That would be very helpful for us.
Yeah, do it. Or Logan's going to come to your house and he's going to be a sift blocker and knock you over.
Yeah, cut the legs out from under you, right?
You can't even do that on the field, but we can do it in real life.